Welcome to the webinar, How and Why to Apply to the Rockefeller Foundation Cassava Innovation Challenge. Thank you for joining and allowing us a few minutes to get all the participants in place and settled. Our presenters will start by introducing themselves and their organizations before we provide an overview of the agenda for today. Hunter Goldman from Rockefeller Foundation will start with his introduction and the introduction of Rockefeller Foundation before we move over to IITA, and then I will finally introduce myself.
Hello everyone, thank you again for joining the webinar today. My name is Hunter Goldman. I'm a Senior Program Associate at the Rockefeller Foundation, where I'm right now focusing on our new initiative called YieldWise. Earlier this year, we launched the YieldWise initiative at the Davos World Economic Forum, which is a $130 million commitment that aims to reduce food loss by 50% in 2030. Nigeria is one of our focus countries, and Cassava is one of the value chains where we're working, and looking forward to sharing more details with you today.
Hello, welcome to the webinar. My name is David Decoyer. I'm a research scientist at IITA. I work on yam breeding and I'm project leader for the Africa Yam project. I have experience in tuber crops, potato and yam. We're looking at storage issues and quality attributes after storage, and I hope to contribute to this exercise and helping to find the best technical and cassava specific results that will lead to the helping the farmers in Africa.
Thank you. I'm Peter Oladele Kolawole, a post-harvest specialist at Cassava Commodity. I have a knowledge in crop processing and storage, and I knew much about cassava since IITA work solely part of the mandate crop. We have cassava, and what IITA actually stands for is to ensure food security, reduce hunger and malnutrition in sub-Saharan Africa and the world at large. Currently, we are actually looking for a solution how to preserve the root, the harvested root after harvesting, and how to keep it for the next production stage. Thank you.
Hello, this is Nneka Eze. I'm an associate partner at Dulberg and the director of our Lagos office. I also co-lead our global agriculture and food security practice area. Dulberg is a strategy consulting firm, and we focus primarily on issues of global development with an aim to solve the world's most pressing development challenges. We've been leading the strategy design and implementation for the challenge on behalf of the Rockefeller Foundation and working closely with IITA on the challenge. I'll give you an overview of what the next 55 minutes will look like. We'll first really provide an overview of the rationale for the challenge and our objectives in launching the challenge. Next, we'll talk through some further detail on the judging criteria, what we're really looking for as we're going to be screening applications that you'll hopefully submit. Next, we'll walk through an overview of the timeline, what the next few weeks and months will look like, and key dates. Just to highlight up front, the deadline for the open phase application, which is open now, is July 8th, 2016 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll then walk through the application itself, providing some tips and answering questions, and then we'll close with a question and answer session where we can hopefully answer the questions that you all have previously submitted via social media as well as via our email account. We're also making a recording of this webinar, which will be available online next week. In the next section, Challenge Issues and Objectives, David and Peter from the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture will talk us through the key issues, and Hunter Goldman from the Rockefeller Foundation will then discuss the challenge objectives and why the Rockefeller Foundation really launched this challenge.
Why apply for the Rockefeller Foundation Cassava Innovation Challenge? We need you to solve a problem. Cassava is a starchy root crop, also known as yucca, tapioca, or manioc. It is used in a range of products for food, pharmaceutical, and other applications. The root can survive underground for up to a year, but it starts spoiling in the first day after harvest. Cassava is a major source of food and income in Africa, but millions of tons are wasted every year. It is a staple food for 500 million people in Africa and a major source of income for 200 million farmers. In Nigeria, up to 40% of cassava produced is lost to spoilage even before it reaches processing units, even with some varieties of cassava that can last above ground for up to 3 days after harvest before spoiling.
Yeah. Several other issues derive spoilage in the value chain and the speed of post-harvest deterioration. For example, at the input level, farmers lack access to improved variety of cassava that are more resilient to spoilage. Also, because farmers do not have proper storage facilities, they store the roots underground for months, which eventually reduces the starch content of the roots. During harvesting, separation of roots from the stem and the use of handheld tools leave bruises that speed up the spoilage process. After harvest, farmers sell their cassava roots to traders who are not incentive to care for the roots. Poor packaging and handling while loading and unloading during transportation do damage these crops. Finally, processing units are far away from farm. Roads are often poor and traders experience multiple delays. There have been a number of innovations in cassava over the past 40 years. They are focused on introducing new varieties and improve farming practices in order to, 1, reduce pests, increase yield, or increase nutritional content. Unfortunately, the shelf life issue in raw cassava remains. Only 24 to 72 hours available to process the crop collected from the farm, and usually from remote locations.
The challenge seeks solutions that extend the shelf life of raw cassava and reduce spoilage in Nigeria. Some of our objectives for this challenge are looking for innovations from all sectors and countries, really a global challenge, whether products, services, or process improvements that have the potential to extend the shelf life of cassava. The Rockefeller Foundation Cassava Innovation Challenge aims to reduce spoilage in the cassava value chain in Nigeria by supporting solutions that enhance shelf life. We are interested in increasing the time it takes for cassava to become inedible or unfit for processing following harvest due to physical deterioration. More information and the official challenge rules are available on our website, which is listed on the slide here. Please note that the challenge is open only for another 3 weeks, so make sure you visit the site as soon as possible. For further information, please email info@cassavachallenge.com.
I'll now provide an overview of the judging criteria we'll be using to judge the different applications that we hope to receive from you. The judging criteria that we've identified will allow us to unearth new ideas to impact smallholder farmers in a positive way. We have a panel of judges that will evaluate submissions based on 4 criteria: innovation, financial sustainability, replicability and scale, and development impact. I'll walk through each of those just so you get a sense of what we're really looking for as we review your applications. On the innovation side, we're looking to consider whether your proposed solution will or can increase the shelf life of cassava. We're looking for solutions that might put forward new practices or products that will significantly affect the cassava value chain, in addition to perhaps looking at applications that come from other value chains outside of cassava. we're very interested in unearthing new ideas, so what might not currently be available, and making it more available to smallholder farmers. In terms of development impact, we're really looking at solutions that demonstrate a larger impact on the welfare of farmers and their families and the development of the cassava value chain. So you may consider, for example, things like the level of income that smallholder farmers have and their ability to access certain technologies. Around replicability and scale, we're very interested in the potential for the solution to be applied in Nigeria, but hopefully not just in one location. Hopefully it can be applied across Nigeria, but also in the other developing countries where cassava is also a staple crop and also faces these spoilage issues. Then finally, we're very interested in financial sustainability, so the ability of the solution to become perhaps commercially viable once the challenge funding is depleted. So really interested to understand how we might sort of apply that funding during the year or 2 years after the grant, but also what happens after the funding ends. We encourage you to approach your application really with a view to these criteria as you answer the different essay questions. The idea is to select 50 applications that will move forward to the next round, where even more detail can be provided than in the current application. I'll now provide a quick overview of the challenge timeline before we walk through the application. We have outlined 2 phases or 2 rounds of judging that will take place over the next few months, with winners of the Cassava Innovation Challenge to be announced by mid-November. In the first phase, you have to be shortlisted in order to move on to the second phase of the application. We're currently in the most open phase, which is round 1. As Hunter mentioned, we'll urge you over the next 3 weeks to submit your application by the deadline. But right now the open phase is open, so please do submit your application. After submission, we're going to do a pre-screen for eligibility, and that's to make sure that you've met the criteria around the country in which you're operating in line with the standards from the US government, as well as make sure you've explained any prior relationship with the challenge organizers, and of course to make sure that your application is on topic in terms of extending the shelf life of raw cassava. We'll then have a judging process with a number of judges, both from Dulberg and IITA, as well as from a range of external organizations who will be reviewing applications. We'll share information on the status of your application by July 29th, at the end of July, and if you're invited to the closed application, meaning you're shortlisted, you'll be asked to submit a more detailed application form explaining your solution by the end of August. After that, we'll review the finalist applications and announce the winners by November 14th. I'm now going to walk through stage by stage of the application itself and provide some tips based on our view of the judging criteria that might help you in applying and submitting your application over the next few weeks. Before we get started with that, we'd like to take a quick poll of each of you to understand how far you've gotten with your application. So we'll give you about 2 minutes if you can respond to the poll that should be up just now, asking the question, how far have you gotten with your application? So the question is, have you completed it, started it, or not yet started your application? We'll give you about 2 minutes, so please vote. Great. Well, thank you for the voting. It looks like quite a number of you have started or completed. So about 59% of you have either started or completed your applications, and another sort of 40% of you have not yet started. But I hope this provides some supporting inputs for those of you who have started and not started, and also some ideas for those of you who have submitted, because you still are able to edit your application after submission. So we'll move on then and talk through really what we'll do over the next couple of weeks in terms of those of you who have either started your application or not yet started your application, what's required. So at first, you'll go to rockefellerfoundation.org/Cassava challenge, and you'll hit apply now, and you'll be brought to this page here. And in the open application phase, what we have is a 3-page application that you'll need to fill in over the next few weeks. What it means first is that you need to start your application. So what we'd suggest doing in advance of starting your application is to review the frequently asked questions, the official challenge rules, as well as the guidelines for the challenge before you start. That way you can make sure to answer any other questions that we don't cover today, as well as ensure that you're eligible for the process. Then you can register your name and email address on the landing page, and that will allow us to both contact you about the status of your application, as well as provide a unique link to your email address that you can use to fill out the application. So once you'll do that, you'll be brought on to the first sort of full page of the application, which is really about basic information about yourself and your organization. So first, you'll provide some information around your name, your organization, where it's based, what sectors it's operating in. You'll also provide some information about your annual operating budget. And then, as I noted earlier, some information about any relationship that you have with the challenge organizers, which include the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture, Dulberg Global Development Advisors, and of course, the Rockefeller Foundation. If you answer yes to that question about a past relationship, you will need to provide further information about the nature of the relationship so that we can assess your eligibility. On the next page is where I guess the fun begins with the application, where you really get to demonstrate to us what is your idea, what is your solution, and how can it help to address the shelf life challenge that we have in Cassava. The first question is really about describing your innovation and hopefully about the potential impact. It asks you to briefly describe your solution, how it is relevant to the challenge, and how your solution will reduce cassava spoilage. Some tips here is really focus on the problem that we're trying to solve. We're looking at innovations that will extend the shelf life of raw cassava. We define shelf life as the time it takes for raw cassava to be rendered inedible or unsaleable. And I think what we've said previously is really make sure that the solution you present addresses that problem or has the potential to address that problem. For example, we're not as interested in the processed cassava versus raw cassava, working with smallholder farmers and further down the chain up until processing. Second, use simple and clear language, but don't leave out the important details. At this stage in the process, we're really interested in focusing on what your innovation is, how it works, why it's new, or why it's innovative. You don't need to go into too much detail about the research or the theory behind the solution in this question. There is another question that can get into that. The next question we have is around the stage of your innovation. Is it at concept stage, early stage, or even scale up? And how it adds to existing work in cassava or is transformational. Here we would like you to be explicit about the stage of innovation of your solution, as well as whether it builds on existing innovations. For this question, hopefully you'll let us know if it's a concept, early stage, or scale up, and we have defined that in the application itself, as well as identify whether or not your innovation is brand new or builds on whether it's work in another value chain, work in another industry or sector that you've seen previously, and ideally why it can support the shelf life of cassava. You'll then focus on a few other questions about the impact. So one question says, clearly indicate the extension in shelf life you expect to achieve with your solution. Here we really do want you to quantify, or at least attempt to quantify, the extension in shelf life your solution will achieve. For this question, you could, for example, put the number of hours or number of days that you think it will achieve, but also some justification for why you think your solution can extend shelf life by the amount of time that you've stated. The next question we ask is for you to indicate the impact of your solution on smallholder farmer welfare and the overall cassava value chain to function. We want to understand how your solution could impact farmers' lives. Here, it's about the broader impact your solution could have on the lives of farmers. It's about how your solution might, for example, increase market access, perhaps increase incomes, improve nutrition, and a whole host of other potential benefits that your solution might have. We'll also, on page 3 of the application, ask you for information about how your solution can be applied. The first question asks about the intended scale of your solution beyond its initial location. Here, really interested to have some thought behind this on how you might scale, when you might scale, and even perhaps the rationale for scaling, or perhaps the rationale for less scale, depending on the solution that you have. Next, we do ask for a sense of the total funding you'd require to introduce or to scale your solution, depending on which stage you're in terms of innovation. The tip here is really just to justify the numbers that you give, and if you can, break down to an extent how much of your funding might be needed in the initial stages of the work. The final questions ask about, first, briefly describing your team that might be responsible for the implementation. Here really is a brief overview of the different team members, what they bring to the solution, and perhaps what experience or expertise they could bring to bear. We don't need essays on this in terms of multiple pages of past information, really just a brief description to give us a sense of what your team can contribute. The last question asks that you describe how the solution will be financially sustainable. And I believe this one is really just to understand how you understand the market for your solution, how you might take into account considerations for your target customers, for example, smallholder farmers or small processors, and how affordable the solution might be to them. A few last tips around the application itself. Here, we would strongly suggest that you check all of your responses and make sure that you click submit before the application deadline. So a few housekeeping tips, I guess. Reread all your responses. Please don't exceed the word limit on any question. Answer all the required questions, because otherwise you would not be able to submit. Save each page before you move on to the next one. And of course, press save and then press submit to submit your application, during which you'll also need to agree to the official challenge rules, terms, and conditions on that final page. Over the past few weeks, you've submitted a number of questions to us that are not necessarily covered in our frequently asked questions. So Peter, David, and I will now answer some of the questions you've submitted via email and social media. The first set of questions focuses more around the eligibility requirements, as well as what issues that you might want to focus on within the cassava value chain. And then finally, a few more questions around how to use the website and how to apply.
Okay, I'll start with the questions we've received so far. The first one is, our organization is based in DRC, Congo. Can we still apply? We have received multiple questions like this, and the answer is a resounding yes. We want to get solutions from organizations around the world. So please apply. You don't have to be based in Nigeria or even operating in Nigeria at the time you apply. However, because the grant money will come from a U.S. foundation, we are restricted by U.S. Department of Treasury OFAC rules from granting funds to organizations in certain countries. Please visit the U.S. Treasury Sanctions Program and Country Information page for a list of OFAC sanctioned countries.
Yeah, thank you. The second question here is, we are an NGO based in Malawi. Can we apply for funding to implement our solution in Malawi? Yes, we are seeking solutions that will address the causes of high cassava spoilage in Nigeria. For this reason, the winners must use funds to implement their solution in Nigeria during the grant period. However, organizations do not need to have prior experience in Nigeria and can identify implementing partners in Nigeria during the grant period. And they might even want to test solutions nearer to them before bringing the solution to Nigeria.
Next, we have a question that we've received from multiple applicants. My business specializes in IT, and we have no experience in agriculture. Will this count against us? The answer this time is a resounding no. Food waste is a global problem, and we believe that it will take a global response from multiple industries and sectors to solve it. So whether you are a scientist, a software engineer, a mechanical engineer, or simply a really good problem solver, you should apply.
Our company provides technology that processes agricultural raw materials into nutritional and industrial commodity. Are we eligible? The question around eligibility is a bit tricky, but you can definitely apply. Eligibility will be determined based on whether the application is complete, whether there's a relationship with the challenging organizer, and whether the solution addresses the key challenge issue, extending the shelf life of raw cassava. If your solutions meet those three criteria, then it is eligible. Now, if your solution is just about scaling up an existing processing unit, that will not solve the issue that drive high spoilage in the first place. However, if, for example, your solution is an innovation that will bring mobile processing unit to farms, then that will solve the issue of distance between the farms and the processing centers and will reduce cassava spoilage.
Does my solution need to solve the numerous value chain issues, or can I focus on just one problem? No, you do not need to solve all the value chain issues, and you are welcome to focus on only one issue. The important thing is that you provide an innovative solution that will reduce spoilage by extending the shelf life of a cassava.
Is it possible for the organizers to merge two ideas or two entries from separate applicants to bring about a better or superior solution? Yes, we call this matchmaking. In addition to the judging criteria, each application will be reviewed for whether it is a potentially good match with another application. Matchmaking decisions happen after applications have been scored, and the idea is to really bring together ideas that could work well together in solving this issue of cassava shelf life. Candidates for matchmaking will be informed at the end of July when we announce the shortlisted applications. The next set of questions, as I mentioned, focuses around the website and submissions of applications. Where can I find the challenge rules and guidelines on the website? We've provided 2 links here. RockefellerFoundation.org/Cassava Challenge has the latest information on all of the above challenge rules, frequently asked questions, and guidelines on the application landing page as well, which is also provided here. Next question focuses on one we've received from a number of you, a number of applicants. I've been trying to submit my application, but the system won't let me. What is wrong? Oftentimes we've seen a few common issues. First, need to make sure that all the required questions have been answered. Second, you need to make sure that you've not exceeded the word limit on any of the questions. And third, we need to make sure you've saved each of the different pages of your application. If you still could not submit your application after doing each of those things, please send us an email at info@cassavachallenge.com. We'll provide that information at the end of the webinar as well. So just keep that in mind. If you do have any issues, please go to the website to fill out the application. The next one is, how can I edit my application after I've submitted it? After you start an application, you receive a confirmation email that has a unique link to you that you can use to access your application in the future. Please use the same link to end your application to access your application after you've submitted it. The last question on this page is around organizations that want to submit more than one solution. How can I do that? The same process that applies to submit one application. You do need to finish one application before you start your next one, or a different individual in the organization can submit a second application or even a third application or more if there are separate solutions that you're coming up with. We encourage you to go to the challenge website and start your application so that we can start to review them as they come in for the pre-eligibility. The one note is that while you are allowed to submit different applications for each organization, you should make sure that the solutions you're proposing are different. I know we're finishing quite early, but I believe we've covered each of the questions submitted to us over email and social media. Thank you very much for joining the webinar. We hope that this has been helpful to each of you. As Hunter has mentioned, and we've reiterated, the challenge is open for only 3 more weeks. Before you submit your application, please make sure you followed along with this webinar and followed our tips and tricks, if you will. July 8th is the final date at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time for submitting your application. We believe that your innovation could hold a major opportunity to impact the livelihoods of millions of people, not just in Nigeria, but across the continent, across the world. We look forward to receiving your completed application on time. Thank you again.